Imagine being handed the keys to, like, the most valuable monopoly in the entire universe. And it's handed to you directly by the supreme ruler of your reality. But you know with absolute mathematical certainty that the whole arrangement is just a meticulously designed death trap.
Right, yeah. A total setup.
Exactly. And you can't refuse the gift because, well, refusing it is political suicide. But accepting it almost certainly means your actual, literal suicide.
It really is the ultimate poison chalice.
It really is. So welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are immersing ourselves in the incredibly rich, just unforgiving universe of Frank Herbert's Dune. Our mission today is to unpack this dense web of political maneuvering, the brutal realities of ecological survival, and the outer limits of human conditioning.
Oh, there's so much to cover.
So much. And we're looking at all of this through the lens of House Atreides,
Yeah.
specifically Duke Leto, Lady Jessica, and their son Paul. We'll see how they navigate a physical desert, a political snare, and this psychological minefield that has essentially been thousands of years in the making.
Yeah, and just to set the stage for you, when the Padishah Emperor, Shaddam IV, orders Duke Leto to leave his home, which is Caladan, this beautiful water-rich paradise.
It's like a resort planet, yeah.
A total paradise. When he orders him to leave that and govern Arrakis, he is deliberately forcing the Atreides into a crucible. Because Arrakis, or Dune, is the only source in the universe of the geriatric spice, melange.
The spice.
The spice, exactly. It extends life, it expands consciousness, and most importantly, it makes interstellar travel mathematically possible. If the spice stops flowing, the whole galactic infrastructure just collapses. So the stakes literally could not be higher.
Okay, let's unpack this because the opening sequence of this entire narrative is just so fascinating to me. Before they even pack up the ships on Caladan, the stakes aren't framed by, like, a massive space battle.
No, not at all.
It happens in a small bedroom, a 15-year-old boy and an old woman. The Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohayim, the Emperor's truthsayer, arrives to administer a test.
And she brings the Gom Jabbar.
Yes, the Gom Jabbar. Let's talk about what is actually happening in this scene, because the physical mechanics of this test are, frankly, deeply unsettling. But the philosophical implications are what really matter. She basically forces Paul to put his hand into a black box, holds a poison needle, the Gom Jabbar, to his neck, and says, "If you withdraw your hand, I kill you."
Right, and then the box just starts to simulate unimaginable pain through nerve induction.
Which is wild. Can you explain that mechanism?
Yeah, so the mechanism of the box is really crucial to understand. It isn't actually burning him, it isn't crushing him, it is pure nerve induction.
So his hand is perfectly fine?
Physically, yes. His hand is perfectly safe. But his nervous system is receiving the absolute maximum pain signals a human body can register, like the sensation of his flesh crisping and dropping away to the bone.
Oh, man, that is horrific.
It is. But the Bene Gesserit use this precise mechanism because they aren't just testing his pain tolerance. Like, it's not an endurance test. They are testing the architecture of his consciousness. Mohayim explicitly says she is testing to see if he is, quote, human.
And that definition of human is what's so wild to me here. I mean, usually you and I think of humanity in terms of, like, empathy or creating art.
Sure.
But the Bene Gesserit define it completely through the lens of crisis management and threat assessment. She tells him that an animal caught in a trap will gnaw off its own leg to escape.
Because that's a reactive biological imperative.
Exactly, just pure instinct. But a human will endure the pain of the trap, feign death, and wait for the trapper to return so they can eliminate the threat to their species.
It's an incredibly cold utilitarian definition.
It really is. It basically asks, can your conscious mind override your most primal, screaming biological instinct?
Right. The Bene Gesserit actually refer to this as the override because they believe that animal instinct is governed entirely by immediate sensory input, just avoiding pain and seeking pleasure.
Basic stimulus response.
Exactly. But human consciousness, at least in their really strict dogma, requires a kind of background grid through which to process the universe.
A grid? What do you mean?
Like a mental framework. This grid allows a human to conceptualize the future, to recognize a broader existential threat, and to, like we said, override the immediate biological imperative of their own nervous system to achieve a higher goal.
Wow.
If Paul had pulled his hand out to stop the pain, he would have proven he was driven by animal instinct. and Mohiam would have killed him with the Gom Jabbar without a second thought.
Wait, isn't it incredibly arrogant, though? I mean, for the secretive elite political order to just wander around deciding who qualifies as human and who doesn't based on a torture device, it's like a psychological stress test taken to the absolute extreme where failing doesn't mean you get a bad grade, but instant execution.
Oh, it's massively arrogant.
Yeah.
But you have to look at how Paul survives it. He doesn't just clench his teeth and tough it out.
Right, he uses that specific technique.
Exactly. He deploys a highly specific cognitive behavioral technique his mother taught him. The litany against fear.
I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer.
Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. Yeah. It's a brilliant articulation of mindfulness, really. Emotional objectification.
How so? Like he's just ignoring the fear.
No, that's the key. When Paul recites the litany, he isn't suppressing the fear or pretending it doesn't exist. Because suppression takes energy and eventually, it fractures.
It always breaks eventually.
Right. Instead, he allows the fear to pass over him and through him. He separates his core consciousness from the biological, neurochemical reaction happening in his brain.
Oh, I see. He steps back.
Yes. He observes the fear passing through him as a temporary state, rather than identifying as the fear. And when the fear is gone, he turns the inner eye to see its path. And only his conscious self remains. It's the ultimate expression of that Bene Gesserit override.
That is fascinating. But it still brings up the question of their endgame. Like, why subject a 15-year-old to this right now, just as his family is about to be uprooted to literally the most dangerous planet in the universe?
Well, because for the Bene Gesserit, the political maneuvering of the Emperor and the Atreides is honestly just background noise.
Really? A planetary takeover is background noise?
To them, yeah. They are playing a much longer game. They are running a massive, highly controlled genetic breeding program that spans thousands of years. They use tests like the Gom Jabbar to sift bloodlines, essentially separating the human stock from the animal stock.
So it's eugenics?
Basically, yes. They are carefully crossing genetic traits across millennia to produce a superbeing, the Kwisatz Haderach.
Right, the one who can be many places at once. Because the female Bene Gesserit can access their genetic memories, but only down the feminine line, right?
Correct. There's a psychic void, the masculine line that they are absolutely terrified to look into.
So they want a male Bene Gesserit.
Exactly. A male who has the mental training, but can look into both the masculine and feminine pasts. And Lady Jessica, Paul's mother, threw a massive wrench into this 10,000-year plan.
She completely derailed it, didn't she?
She threw an absolute grenade into it. Jessica was under strict orders to bear only daughters to Duke Leto. The plan was likely to marry an Atreides daughter to the Harkonnen heir, Fade Rafa.
Oh, wow. To unite the rival houses?
Yeah, to seal the breach between the two houses and produce the Kwisatz Haderach in that next generation. But Jessica, out of love for the Duke and knowing he wanted an heir, defied her conditioning. She chose to bear a son instead.
So she just arrogantly thought she could produce the Messiah a generation early.
Essentially, yes. And this is why Mohiam is so furious during the test. The Atreides are walking into an inescapable political trap on Arrakis, and because of Jessica's defiance, a crucial, irreplaceable bloodline might just be wiped out entirely.
Which is why Mohiam lays it out so bluntly before she leaves. She basically tells them they might be able to salvage Paul, but she says, for the father, nothing.
She completely writes Duke Leto off as a dead man.
Yeah, and that pivot from the deep genetic manipulation of the Bene Gesserit to the immediate, visceral, political reality of the trap Leto is walking into, it's staggering. We really have to look at the architecture of this trap, because it is just brilliant in its malice.
It really is. We have to look at the Harkonnen perspective.
Right, the Harkonnens, they are heavily industrialized on Giedi Prime, led by Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. This is a man so consumed by excess, he requires anti-gravity suspensors just to support his own massive weight.
And he's plotting with his mentat, Peter de Vries, and his nephew, Fade Rafa.
So to really grasp the danger of this trio, we need to understand the role of the mentat, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. The mentat is crucial to this universe. You have to remember the Butlerian Jihad.
The ancient crusade against computers.
Right. It destroyed all thinking machines and resulted in this absolute religious commandment. Thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of a human mind.
Which leaves a pretty big problem if you're trying to run an interstellar empire.
A massive processing deficit. You cannot run an empire without complex computation. So they created specialized schools to train human minds to extraordinary levels. The Spacing Guild mastered mathematics for navigation, And the Menkat school trained humans to act as supreme logicians.
Living computers.
Exactly. Capable of processing vast amounts of data and projecting incredibly accurate probabilities.
But Peter de Vries, the Baron's mentat, is distinctly flawed, which makes him terrifying. The Baron explicitly uses Piter as a teaching tool for young Fade, pointing out that Piter consumes massive amounts of spice.
His eyes are stained deep blue from the addiction.
Right. And he is prone to emotional, sadistic outbursts. I mean, a mentat is supposed to be cold and calculating, right? But Piter actually takes pleasure in his work.
He does. But the Baron understands that a tool with flaws is often more useful as long as you know what those flaws are. Peter is efficient, but his emotional instability means he can err. And the Baron fully intends to have him killed the moment he outlives his usefulness.
It's just a masterclass in ruthless resource management.
And the plan Piter has calculated is perfectly lethal. They are giving up the Arrakis fiefdom to the Atreides, allowing them to take control of the spice production, only to return with an overwhelming military force to wipe them out.
But it's not just Harkonnen troops. That's the kicker here.
No, it's not.
The Baron reveals they are being secretly backed by the Emperor's own elite terror troops, the Sardaukar disguised in Harkonnen livery. So let's unpack the macro politics of this for a second. If you're the Emperor and you're threatened by Duke Leto's rising popularity, why not just revoke his titles? Or, if you want him dead, why not just glass his homeworld from orbit? Why go through this incredibly convoluted proxy war?
Well, because the Emperor's power isn't actually absolute. The political structure of the known universe is this delicate tripod.
Okay, break that down for her.
You have the imperial household holding the throne, you have the spacing guild holding the monopoly on all interstellar travel and banking, and then you have the Landsraad.
Which is like the parliament of the great houses, right?
Yeah, right. No single house can stand against the Emperor's Sardaukar legions. But if the Emperor were to blatantly attack a great house without legal provocation, the entire Landsraad would realize that they could be picked off one by one.
Ah, so they'd gang up on him.
Exactly. They would unite, combine their house atomics and their private armies, and overthrow the Emperor. So the Emperor must maintain the illusion of legality.
And wrapping this entire tripod together is CHO, right? The Universal Development Corporation, where everyone holds shares. And CHO's entire balance sheet is built on the spice.
Yep. The spice dictates everything.
So the Emperor uses the age-old rivalry between House Atreides and House Harkonnen. He orders Leto to take Arrakis. It looks like a promotion to the rest of the universe, but it's actually a death sentence. By using the Harkonnens as the visible knife, the Emperor eliminates a rival without alarming the Landsraad, and the Baron gets his revenge and reclaims his spice monopoly.
It's a win-win for them.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Leto isn't stupid. He has his own mentat, Bufur Hawat. And Leto tells Paul point blank that he knows it's a trap. He literally says, knowing where the trap is, that's the first step in evading it.
Right. He walks in with his eyes open.
So my question is, if you know the boardroom of this new company you're taking over is wired with explosives, and you know the CEO of the bank is holding the detonator, why accept the position? Why not refuse the order, stay on Caladan, and force the Emperor's hand?
Because of the legal doctrine of Canley, the formal vendetta, and the strictures of the Great Convention. If Leto defies a direct legal order from the Padishah Emperor, he becomes a renegade.
He loses everything.
Everything. He forfeits his titles, his holdings, his legal protection. The Landsraad would turn on him just to carve up his assets. He would be hunted down and destroyed with total legal justification.
But what if he goes to the Landsraad and blows the whistle on the Emperor's secret deal with the Baron?
He has zero proof. None. He would just be a duke making wild accusations against the throne. The Emperor denies it, the Baron denies it, and Leto is assassinated in the resulting political chaos anyway.
So he's boxed in.
Completely. His only choice is to walk into the trap. But Leto is looking for what he calls the main chance. He believes that by controlling Arrakis, even temporarily, he gains leverage. And more importantly, he has a revolutionary military doctrine.
Right, desert power.
Exactly. Leto has looked at the Emperor's power, the Sardaukar, and he asks, where do they come from? Seleucus Secundus, the Emperor's prison planet, which is an absolute hellscape.
Right.
Leto theorizes that extreme, brutal, unforgiving environments forge the most lethal human beings.
So he looks at Arrakis, which is this absolute meat grinder of a planet,
Yeah.
and realizes that the native population surviving out in the deep desert, the Fremen, they must be incredibly hardened warriors.
It's his thesis.
If he can ally with them, harness their survival skills and their ferocity, he thinks he can forge an asymmetric military force capable of rivaling the Sardaukar. But it's a massive gamble, betting his entire house on the sociology of a people he barely understands.
It is a huge gamble.
Uh,
And that leads us directly into understanding the ecological reality of Arrakis itself. Because Leto's theory of desert power is inextricably linked to the sheer hostility of the environment.
the environment isn't just a setting here.
No, it is an active, dominant force. It dictates every single political, social, and military interaction on the planet. I mean, Thufir Hawat briefs Paul on the atmospheric conditions, and it is just terrifying. The Coriolis storms build up across thousands of kilometers of unbroken flatlands, reaching wind speeds of 700 kilometers an hour.
Wait, 700?
700. And Hawat specifically notes that these storms are loaded with static electricity and abrasive dust. It's not just a heavy wind. It will literally eat the flesh off a human body and etch the bones to slivers.
So you can't outrun it.
You can't outrun it, and if you are caught in the open, you are erased. Period.
And if the sky doesn't kill you, the ground will. Because the moment you introduce rhythmic vibration to the sand, like, say, a massive spice harvesting factory moving on treads, you summon the sandworms.
The apex predators.
Right, and we are talking about territorial monsters recorded at over 400 meters in length. That is larger than an aircraft carrier moving through the deep sand like a whale through water.
The logistical nightmare of that is just insane. To harvest spice, you have to drop a massive factory onto the sand via a giant carry-all aircraft, mine frantically, and then snatch the factory back into the air the second the worm sign appears, because a worm will swallow a multi-ton factory whole and not even slow down.
It's unbelievable. But honestly, the most pervasive, psychologically defining element of Arrakis isn't the storms or the worms. It's the absolute total lack of surface water. The water scarcity on Dune is so profound that it literally dictates the currency, the morality, and the physical engineering of the entire culture.
Yeah, you see this so clearly in the scene with Dr. Yu and Lady Jessica in the Arrakeen residency. They are looking out a window at a courtyard where 20 date palms have been planted by the former rulers.
Yu breaks down the brutal mathematics of this display, right? He says one date palm requires 40 liters of water a day to survive. A human being on minimum rations requires 8 liters.
So every single day, one palm tree consumes the water equivalent of 5 human lives.
That's horrifying.
Those 20 trees in the courtyard are drinking enough water to sustain 100 men. And outside the walls, the local population is watching those trees with a mixture of awe, envy, and deep, deep hatred.
It is the ultimate flex of imperial power. I mean, think about it. It's like an oligarch parking a fleet of solid gold yachts in their driveway, leaving the engines running 24/7 just to prove they can afford the fuel, while the people walking past their gate are literally dying of starvation.
That is a perfect analogy. It's an obscene display of wealth in a poverty-stricken world. And Jessica immediately recognizes the danger of this. She realizes that every breath, every movement on this planet is governed by the lack of moisture.
And this scarcity is what forged the Fremen in the deep desert. They live entirely outside the formal imperial structure. Their survival hinges on the still suit.
Which is just a marvel of thermodynamic engineering.
Can you explain how the still suit works? Because it's wild.
Yeah, it is a full-body garment designed to capture and recycle almost all the body's moisture. It reclaims sweat, urine, feces, and even the moisture from your exhalation. It filters it all back into potable water through catch pockets. A Fremen in a properly fitted still suit out in the deep desert will lose no more than a thimbleful of moisture a day.
A thimbleful. That's incredible.
Well-
And while the Imperials think the Fremen are just these ragtag scavengers who smell terrible in enclosed spaces, the Fremen are actually adapted to a reality the Imperium cannot even fathom. But there's an underlying mystery here that Jessica and you touch upon, which shows how deep Herbert's world building goes. They talk about the water traps and the wells that the Imperium drilled in the basins.
Right, the drills hit water, produce a trickle, and then mysteriously stop.
And Jessica suspects some living agency is deliberately plugging the wells.
She senses that the water isn't just missing. It is being actively managed by the ecosystem. The lack of water, the life cycle of the massive sandworms, and the creation of the spice. They are not isolated phenomena. They are a single, interconnected biological engine that the Imperium, in its greed, has completely failed to understand.
Because the Imperium just views Arrakis as a mine to be stripped.
Right, but Leto is the only one trying to understand the planet as an ecosystem. He knows that if he can integrate with the Fremen, he integrates with the planet itself.
But the unbearable tragedy of Leto's situation is that while he is looking out into the deep desert for salvation, analyzing the storms and the Fremen, the lethal blow is already inside his heavily fortified house.
It's already there.
Thufir Hawat, who is one of the greatest security minds in the universe, has locked down the residency against external threats. But the Harkonnens outmaneuvered him by achieving what everyone in the universe believed was psychologically and medically impossible. They broke a Suk doctor.
This is such a devastating plot point, because it strikes at the very foundation of trust in the Imperium.
Dr. Wellington, yeah.
Right. Dr. Yui is a graduate of the Suk school, bearing the diamond tattoo on his forehead. That tattoo signifies Imperial conditioning. It means his mind has been so thoroughly structurally conditioned that it is physically impossible for him to take a human life or betray his master.
So it's basically a guarantee.
It is the ultimate guarantee. The conditioning is so absolute that Suk doctors are trusted alone with the Emperor.
So how does a man whose brain is essentially hardwired against betrayal end up turning off the shields and handing Duke Leto to the Baron?
Well, the Baron's Ventat, Pitter, explains the horrific logic of it. They didn't bribe you. They didn't threaten his own life. They kidnapped his wife, Wana.
Who was a Bene Gesserit herself.
Yes. And they subjected her to Harkonnen tortures, keeping her alive in a state of unimaginable agony. The Baron found the one fulcrum that could move an immovable object. It was profound, empathetic capacity to love.
Oh, that is so twisted. He weaponized his empathy.
Exactly. He weaponized the very trait that makes you a healer. By holding Wana in perpetual torture, the Baron created an inescapable cognitive dissonance in Yu's conditioned mind. Yu must stop his wife's pain.
But the only way to stop her pain is to confirm her fate and get close enough to the Baron to kill him.
Right, and the only way the paranoid Baron will ever allow Yu into his physical presence is if Yu delivers the Duke.
It is just the darkest, most agonizing loop. Yu isn't some cackling villain. He deeply respects Leto. He loves Paul. He even gives Paul a priceless antique miniature orange Catholic Bible as a gesture of profound guilt and affection. When you read that scene, you just want to scream at Yu to tell Leto, like, why not just go to the Duke, explain that the Baron has Wana, and work together to stop him?
Because Yue is a brilliant man who knows the tactical reality. He knows the trap closing around Arrakis is massive, backed by the Emperor, and entirely inescapable. Leto cannot save Wana. Leto cannot even save himself.
So Yu just accepts it.
He has accepted the grim calculus that the Atreides are already dead. His conditioning has been warped into a singular, obsessive focus. He will use Leto as the delivery mechanism for his own revenge against the Baron. It is a perfect tragedy because Yue is performing the ultimate betrayal out of absolute fractured love.
Wow. And on top of that, the Baron doesn't just rely on Yu turning off the shields. He engages in this multi-layered campaign of psychological warfare designed to completely paralyze the Atreides command structure.
Oh yeah, the fake note.
Right. The Harkonnens intentionally allow a courier to be captured carrying a partially destroyed note. The legible fragment suggests that the lethal blow against the Duke will come, quote, from a beloved hand.
It is a brilliantly targeted piece of disinformation. It lands right on the desk of Thukar Hawat. And Hawat is a mentat, driven by logic and probability. But he's also a master of assassins, driven by paranoia.
So Hawat runs the probabilities and concludes that Lady Jessica, a Bene Gesserit whose true parentage is unknown, must be the traitor.
Right. And Leto's reaction to this is where the political trap destroys the personal. Leto fiercely defends Jessica to Hawat. He knows in his soul she is innocent. But when Hawat leaves, Leto makes a disastrous tactical decision.
He decides to feign suspicion of Jessica.
Yes, thinking that if he appears to suspect her, it will make the real traitor overconfident and careless. He thinks he's executing a high-level counterintelligence maneuver, but he is actually playing right into the Baron's hands.
By icing Jessica out, he isolates himself from his most capable ally at the exact moment he needs her insights to survive. He lets the Harkonnen poison seep into his relationship, breaking the Atreides' unity from the inside.
It's heartbreaking.
And while Hawat is entirely distracted investigating Jessica, the actual physical assassination attempts begin, bypassing Hawat's security entirely. Which brings us to the hunter-seeker sequence.
This perfectly encapsulates the Atreides' philosophy of using intelligence over brute force.
So Paul is resting in his bedroom when a secret panel in the headboard opens and a hunter-seeker slips out. Can you describe what that is for us?
Yeah, a hunter-seeker is a terrifying weapon. It's a sliver of metal, about 5 centimeters long, powered by a suspensor field, and guided by an operator hiding nearby.
Hiding in the walls or something.
Exactly. And it is designed to burrow into moving flesh and chew its way up the nerve channels to a vital organ. It's silent, lethal, and incredibly fast.
Okay, so imagine lying in a dark room and hearing the faint hum of a flying needle hovering inches from your face. The biological instinct, the animal instinct we talked about earlier, would be to scramble away, to swat at it, to run. But Paul relies on his training. He immediately assesses the physical limitations of the technology.
Right, because he knows the physics of it.
Exactly. The hunter-seeker is supported by a compressed Holtzman suspensor field. And because of the physics of that field, the visual feed sent back to the operator is highly distorted. In dim light, the operator cannot see static shapes. They can only target movement.
So Paul engages willed catatonia. He freezes, overriding every instinct to flee. He waits, tracking the buzz of the machine as it quarters the room.
Why doesn't he just use a shield? Or shoot it?
Well, he can't use a shield. And he notes that a lasgun would destroy it, but firing a laser into a Holtzman field causes a subatomic explosion that would take out the entire wing of the palace.
That's off the table.
Right. He has to use timing and physics. He knows the suspensor field makes the bottom of the seeker incredibly slippery, so he has to strike it from above, gripping it perfectly.
And the tension finally breaks when the door opens and the housekeeper walks in. The seeker immediately darts toward her movement. And Paul doesn't hesitate. His hand shoots out. He grips the slippery metal precisely and smashes its nose against the metal doorplate,
Destroying its sensor eye and saving both of them.
It is a stunning display of the override Mahayam tested him for. He didn't panic. He waited for the absolute perfect microsecond to strike.
And the housekeeper he saves is the Shadout Mapes, who is a Fremen. And her reaction to Paul, and subsequently to his mother, opens up the final, perhaps most profound layer of this story. How the Atreides interact with the Fremen culture, and how the Bene Gesserit have manipulated that culture for centuries.
Mapes tells Paul that the Fremen know there is a traitor among the Atreides, and then she goes to meet Lady Jessica. Now, Mapes has been hired as the head housekeeper, but she is really there to test Jessica. She approaches her with a weapon concealed in her dress. She pulls it out, a crysknife.
The fabled weapon of Arrakis.
Ground from the tooth of a dead sandworm, milky white and glowing with its own inner light, Mapes presents it to Jessica and asks, "Do you know its meaning?"
And this is a life-or-death cultural tripwire. If Jessica answers incorrectly, Mapes will likely kill her. But Jessica uses her Bene Gesserit training. She doesn't just guess, she reads Mapes.
Like reading her body language.
Body language, micro-expressions, the tension in her muscles. Even the linguistic roots of Mapes' title, Shadout, which in the ancient Jacobsa language means well-dipper. Jessica synthesizes all this data in a fraction of a second and realizes the knife represents a maker of death. So she gives the correct answer, maker.
And the reaction from Mapes is explosive. She wails, she drops to the floor, she completely breaks down in a mix of grief and religious ecstasy, believing Jessica is the one. And this is where the sheer, breathtaking cynicism of the Bene Gesserit is revealed. Jessica recognizes what is happening. This is the Missionaria Protectiva.
Yes, the Missionaria Protectiva. It is the Bene Gesserit's Black Ops Theological Engineering Division.
Theological engineering, that's a wild phrase.
It is. Centuries ago, they seeded Arrakis with engineered religious prophecies. They planted legends of a Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother coming from the stars with her son, a Messiah figure called the Lisan al-Gaib.
The voice from the outer world.
Right, who would lead them to paradise. And they didn't do this because they cared about the Fremen's spiritual well-being. They did it as an operational safety net. If any Bene Gesserit sister were ever stranded on this hostile world, she could exploit these pre-planted myths, perform a few specific rituals, and the native population would protect her as a holy figure.
So what does this all mean? They literally hacked the deepest spiritual beliefs of an entire civilization just to create a potential extraction point for their agents.
Exactly. It is staggering in its manipulation.
And Jessica, realizing she is trapped on a planet with Harkonnen assassins and a compromised security force, makes the cold, calculated decision to lean into this sham. She decides to play the role of the prophesied savior to secure Fremen loyalty.
But the danger of the Missionaria Protectiva is that when you plant a myth in an environment as harsh as Arrakis, it takes root and mutates. The Fremen haven't just passively believed the myth, they have forged their entire survival culture around it.
And the central tension for Paul really begins to emerge here. Thufir Hawat reports that the Fremen are shouting, "Mahdi," at Paul in the streets. Paul is stepping into a role that was artificially written for him centuries before he was born.
Is he choosing his destiny? Or is the weight of this engineered prophecy dictating his every move? Is he a messiah or a victim of psychological conditioning on a planetary scale?
That's the million-dollar question. But while Paul is dealing with the weight of prophecy, Leto is focused on the practical reality of survival. He desperately needs this alliance. And we see the culmination of his efforts when his swordmaster, Duncan Idaho, returns from living with the Fremen.
Duncan brings a Fremen leader, Stilgar, into a high-level Atreides staff meeting. And this scene perfectly illustrates the friction between the rigid, formal military hierarchy of the Imperium and the raw, unyielding pragmatism of Fremen culture.
Right, because Stilgar walks into this room of polished generals wearing a still suit, his face veiled, smelling of reclaimed sweat. The Atreides guards immediately demand he surrender his crysknife.
Which, to the Atreides, is just basic security. But to Stilgar, giving up the tooth of the Maker is a profound defilement.
But Leto intervenes, showing incredible political agility. He overrides his own security protocols and tells Stilgar he may keep his weapon, stating, "I honor and respect the personal dignity of any man who respects my dignity."
It's a masterful diffusion of tension.
Yeah.
But then Stilgar does something that nearly causes a bloodbath. He looks at Leto, pulls aside his veil, and spits on the Duke's highly polished table.
Which, in the context of imperial etiquette, is the ultimate insult. The Atreides officers lunge forward, ready to kill him, but Duncan Idaho yells, "Hold," and walks over and deliberately spits on the table right next to Stilgar's moisture.
Duncan translates the cultural syntax for Leto. He explains that on Arrakis, where water is more valuable than gold or human life, giving the moisture of your body to someone else is the highest token of respect a freeman can offer. He literally gave Leto the water from his own body.
And the moment Leto understands the mechanism of the gesture, his entire posture changes. He accepts the tribute gracefully. He navigates the culture clash so well that he agrees to let Duncan Idaho hold a dual allegiance, serving both House Atreides and the Fremen tribe under Stilgar.
Leto is doing everything right here. He is respectful, he is adapting, he is building his desert power. He explicitly tells his staff he needs 5 battalions of Fremen troops before the Emperor's Sardaukar arrive.
He is laying the perfect foundation, but time is the one resource he doesn't have. The tragedy of Duke Leto is that he is a remarkably capable, noble leader who has made all the right strategic moves to secure his family's long-term survival, but the short-term trap is closing too fast.
Much too fast.
After that staff meeting, Leto goes out onto the balcony of the residency. He looks out at the Arrakis stone, which is this beautiful, terrifying display of light over the deep desert. And the full weight of his situation just settles on him.
He knows the Sardaukar are coming. He knows the Harkonnens are plotting.
Right. He knows there is a traitor in his inner circle, and he has alienated the woman he loves. He thinks to himself, "I must rule with eye and claw as the hawk among lesser birds."
It is the realization of a just man that justice will not save him here. He has become ruthless. He has to discard the morality of Caladan and adopt the brutal calculus of Arrakis if he wants to give his son even a fraction of a chance to survive.
Which brings us to the core of what we've uncovered in this deep dive. When you peel back the layers of this story, you see a family walking into a perfectly designed singularity of threats. They face an ecological system that actively tries to kill them, governed by water scarcity and monstrous apex predators.
They are caught in a political proxy war designed by a jealous emperor and executed by a sadistic baron.
And they are navigating a psychological minefield where the absolute certainty of imperial conditioning has been shattered by the weaponization of love, turning their most trusted doctor into their executioner.
It forces us to look past the surface of the narrative. It's not just a story about spaceships and desert planets. It is a rigorous examination of the levers of power, how monopolies control politics, how religion can be engineered as a tool of statecraft, and how environment fundamentally dictates human culture and military doctrine.
The Atreides are trying to survive by adapting to the absolute harshest realities of human existence. Understanding these sources isn't just about sci-fi lore, it's a masterclass in reading subtext and seeing how environment shapes human resilience.
Truly a masterclass.
And as we close, I want you to think about that opening scene with the Gom Jabbar again. The Reverend Mother Morhiam warned Paul that they might salvage him, but for the father, nothing. Leto stands on that balcony, accepting that he is likely a dead man, knowing he must become a creature of eye and claw to prepare his son for the nightmare ahead.
It's a dark realization.
It leaves us with a deeply unsettling question. At what point does a leader's desperate attempt to harden their child against a brutal, unforgiving universe become the very thing that strips away their humanity? The Bene Gesserit box doesn't diagnose what is broken in a person. It inflicts maximum pain and observes what you do with it. The tragedy unfolding on Arrakis isn't just about whether Paul or Leto will be destroyed by the planet. The real question is, when the pain of the trap doesn't stop, what kind of humans will they be forced to become?